Welcome to the Evolution Partners podcast, where I talk with the world's leading thinkers, planners, and doers who are helping to build great companies in their own way. We learn how the work they're doing is creating an impact and get to know a little bit more about them and what makes them tick. This episode is brought to you by Evolution Partners, where we help leaders to confidently build enduring great companies using our proven, structured, strategic planning process that ensures you build and execute the right plan. Check us out at evolutionpartners.com.au. Also, you can check out our books, Made to Thrive, outlining how to be a great CEO, as well as Onboarded, which is about making your new hires more effective faster. Dr. Brad Smart is the founder and CEO of TopGrading Inc, and perhaps most famously, the author of the book TopGrading, which details the method he implemented to hire A players for Jack Welch at General Electric, helping them to become the most valuable company in the world. Brad has written 7 best-selling books on hiring, and the latest, published last year by Forbes Books, is Foolproof Hiring. What I love about Foolproof Hiring is that it's an easy read that's written for busy entrepreneurs. Brad's company, TopGrading Inc, provide consulting and training on how to implement top grading into your company, and pre-screening software that offers employers pre-screen snapshots and interview guides. You can find Brad at topgrading.com. Brad, what I see in you is someone who is passionate about helping companies build teams full of A players and have subsequently devoted your entire career to that. I also suspect that perhaps there's a little bit of frustration from you that the data demonstrates that leaders should be focusing on hiring only A players, but sometimes they don't. If that resonates with you, Brad, tell us, how did you come to be in this place?
Hi, Brad. How did I come to be so frustrated? But you hit the nail on the head. And we were talking a few minutes ago, and I was saying some of my nice friends have wondered, why is it taking you 7 books on hiring? Couldn't you get it right on the first book? No, I guess not. So my story, which has led to frustration, is I was a freshman in college, business major, but that was a little boring, and the Psych 101 was more interesting, and there was a local management psychologist who does a lot of the stuff we do, who taught courses to interest people like me. So he kind of took me under his wing, and I went home and went through Yellow Pages and found some management psychologists, and they took me under their wing, found me summer jobs in college and on the way to the master's degree and on the way to the doctoral degree, which was very interesting from one point of view, is I just kept seeing for all the different jobs I have, it would be on lines and in human resources and doing things for executives in the C-suite. It seemed to be the top 10, 15% of people really made things happen. I said, wow, if any company could hire more of those people, let's just call them A players. You know, in our business, we kind of say someone you would enthusiastically rehire. That's the simplest definition of A player.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. But after reading hundreds, if not thousands of studies on leadership and selection and hiring and testing and all that stuff, didn't seem that the academic world was really interested in high performers, A players. And I told myself, who cares? I'm going to join this firm of management psychologists, got it out, fresh new PhD. Yeah, there I was, Dr. Brad Smart, expert in hiring, but I didn't know anything. And it occurred to me after a few days when I saw what they were doing, and it was too similar to what I had studied that didn't work. I asked the senior partner, what percent of the people we assess through interviews and tests and so forth and are hired turn out to be A players, high performers? He said, I don't know. You don't know? All right. All right. He said, you're the new kid on the block, right? Why don't you go around, introduce yourself to clients and tell them what your background is. But what your question is. What percent turn out to be high performers?
Yeah.
That was not very high. It was only a third. And third, so two-thirds of the people we recommend fall short of your expectations. And I went home to my wife in our apartment. I said, I don't think this is the right business for me. If
Yeah.
I were a real doc, I'm referring to the movie Hangover. The dentist wasn't a real doctor. If
Yep.
I were a real doctor, came home from the hospital every day and said, honey, two-thirds of my patients left the hospital in body bags, I consider myself a failure. So fast forward, I devoted the past many decades to really, you're right, passionately trying to figure out what are solutions to the problems like entrepreneurs have in hiring. And we've come up with some pretty good answers. And frankly, in the about 1995 to 2005 was kind of the heyday for big companies. Now we focus mostly on small companies. But then it was not just GE, but Honeywell and Merck and Shell. The wife of the CEO of Shell worked for me. Barclays. When the CEO left, the top two human resources people became top grading professionals. Wow, it was just that was the heyday because these CEOs were saying, with top grading, you make more money. Your profits go up. Pack your team with A players. This is the way to do it. I retired, sort of, 30 years ago, bought an island home, did a lot of scuba diving, and then came back, and Chris Mersaw had joined me. And as president, he said, let's start. Your son, Jeff, has a top grading company, Jeff's GH Smart, whom you're familiar with.
Yeah.
They just focus on executive hires, and they're very good at that. He said, let's continue doing those interviews of candidates for executive positions, but train managers all the way down to the supervisor level and how to use the same methods.
Yeah.
And Chris was absolutely right. If the whole company does it, the profits are much greater than just the top executives use us for interviews. Okay, so that's where we are. Obviously, we had to develop the technology and so forth to be able to train people, integrate with applicant tracking systems if they have them or not. But it just makes it smoother. There are a number of different steps. Many of these in foolproof hiring, the keys are outlined there. To do those right, be sure they're done right, and to see what the results are and to measure the activities and measure the results. That's what produces the best hiring for sure. So if we were in person, I were in Perth, and we had 20 entrepreneurs there, I'd say, let me read your brain, okay? If you're here and Brett Giles organized this session on hiring, let me guess, you're frustrated because you suffer from too many bad hires, right? And they would just nod, all right? The good news, if it's good news, is it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's a fault of the hiring method that you use. And we know because for many decades we've studied this, what the problems are and what solutions are. And if you're going to look at your hiring method or alternatives, like maybe top grading, you have every right in the world to ask certain questions. Like one question is, does the hiring method you use enable you to sort through resumes and identify the 50% with significant lies? We have lots of research on it. It's in the foolproof hiring, And no, we can't tell if they're for real or if it's just their social profile.
Yeah.
How about your interviews? Do you have pretty good insights into people? And they all say yes. All right, let's think of your interviews. Last time you mishired someone, did your hiring method give you the insights into the person, not just about their strengths, but about the weaker points, including the weaker points that might have caused you to not hire them?
Yeah.
No, I guess I'm not that good at that.
Yeah.
And the third one is, does your hiring method show you examples, case studies of times where their methods were implemented and the quality of hire, percent A players hired, went up, up, up? No, they don't exist. All right. Top grading has answers to those questions. We have a method. You mentioned it. No one knows what it is, but it's mentioned in the foolproof hiring. It's an application screening tool called the pre-screen snapshot that does identify the BSers versus the honest people. So it cuts it down to honest, sharp people you interview. And because we have the best methods, we think, of motivating candidates to be totally honest, to not game you, not fool you. That's the title of the book, Foolproof Hiring. To not fool you, all right? That interviews are suddenly, like overnight, take a deep breath and just having honest communication with the candidates. They're not gaming me. They're willing to admit failures and mistakes. And sharp people overcome failures and mistakes, so they're happy to do that. So interviews are better. So honest resumes, revealing interviews, and darn, in I think probably Australia, but certainly the United States and Western Europe, there are no really good ways to verify if candidates are telling you the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
In the United States, you ask, typically today, millions of candidates are asked, would you please submit 3 names of people and their phone numbers we can call as your references? Yep, it's their next door neighbor, their priest, their psychiatrist, and their golf buddies. And that's bad sense of humor, but it's only people they know will say glowing positive things about them. With TopGrading, you entrepreneurs, think of this. You can have the best verification imaginable. What would that be? Well, that would be to talk with the managers that the candidates reported to. Not all of them, but certainly in the most recent 10 years. Maybe add a couple of peers and direct reports. That happens with TopGrading, and we fine-tune the methods to be sure you don't play telephone tag. Yeah. So candidates, knowing that you're going to be talking with managers they reported to, are more motivated to be totally honest with you. Okay. Yeah. Another question is, just 2 more questions, and that is, what evidence have they given you that their methods work? And I say probably nothing, whereas we're proud, and you know this, Brad, we have dozens of case studies, honest case studies. The name of the company is mentioned, name of the CEO is mentioned. Okay, you can call them. There are a lot of small companies in there, and the average improvement, and this is really important, the average improvement in all those companies, big and small, startups and so forth, is 25% A players hired prior to TopGrading. That's it. They love to have 80%, but it's not. Yeah. The average company, big or small, only hires about 25% A players. But after TopGrading, after 2 or 3 years, they're up to 86%. That's the average, 86% A players. These are high performers, people you would enthusiastically rehire. We honestly don't know of any other company that has even one case study remotely close to that. Okay? Yeah. So the final question is, this is tongue in cheek, but it's absolutely true. Does your hiring method that you have now guarantee results? A money back guarantee? Give me a break. No. Right? Well, in all these years, we've told companies, if you roll out TopGrading and you're not satisfied, you paid us any money, you can ask for your money back. Yeah. Yeah. And one company has done that because these pretty common sense methods actually work. And the reason I'm frustrated today is I bought an island home 30 years ago. I was doing a lot of scuba diving, a little bit of business, continuing to interview candidates, clients would send to the island of Bonaire. But it was Chris Mersall, my president, who said 2 things. All those Fortune 500 companies, global 1,000 companies, the CEOs have retired, very rich, by the way, but we lost all those companies because new CEOs come on. If they haven't heard of TopGrading and they bring on their head of human resources, never heard of TopGrading, they just get rid of it. So you got to rebuild it. TopGrading 2.0 with technology so we can train people all the way down the organization. And I'm so glad that he persuaded me to do this, because one of the biggest kicks we get, yes, we love companies to make more money. We also love managers all the way down to supervisors. We don't hear from many of them, but we hear from a lot of mid-managers and directors and VPs and so forth. Their life is better with top grading.
Yeah.
Seriously, instead of just 25% A players, they have more than, let's say, 75% anyway, A players. So they probably have fewer people, but higher performers they can delegate to. They're more successful, earn more promotions, start businesses. Top grading creates entrepreneurs. We know that. That'd be an interesting book, I think, on how that happened. So that's why I'm passionate about it. I kind of want to spread the word.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs can help.
Awesome. I thank you, first of all. I first came across and read Top Grading. I think it must have been 2004. Implemented it into my company.
Right.
As I'll just say, in fairness, as best as I could at that point, because I was a rough person having a try, and it worked really well. Taking more time to hire, talk method, phone screening, the whole range of things was fabulous. I want to come back to something that you said before about A players. Now, you won't remember this. I saw you speak at the Entrepreneurial Masters program in Boston. It must have been 2009 or 2010. And you spoke...
At first, I thought you were going to say it's 2,000 years ago. I'm not that old.
No. And you spoke about A players then as well, and obviously I've just spoken extensively about A players. But A players is a word that's bandied around, and you put a bit of a definition on it there, which is in the top 25%. I've heard others, I think I've heard you say before, it's in the top 10% of available candidates at the pay rate that you offer. That last bit, at the pay rate that you offer, is so incredibly important.
Yes, yeah.
But you can only get the top 10% of candidates if you're spending time hiring or on your hiring process. So how do you react to because so many people throw around the word A players without a real hard definition. Mm-hmm. How do you react to that? Maybe you've already elaborated on the A player, but just talk to us about A players, what it means.
Yeah, high performers. Yeah, see, Chris and I and other top grading professionals, as you well know, do a chronological interview. And we get to every job, every managerial job. The question is, what sort of talent did you inherit? What percent were A players, B players, C players? Well, we've got to be able to give them a definition they can use right away, or this is going to be a very, very long interview. Yeah. Say A players, high performers, someone you would enthusiastically rehire. B players, someone who's good. You're probably not going to get rid of them if they're a good performer, unless you have top grading results where at least 75% of the people you hire turn out to be A players, so they're safe. But the C players, low performers and so forth, you'll change them, and they're below the good performers. They're underperformers, right? I'll give you a little story here. This book, Top Grading for Sales, by Greg Alexander and Brad Smart, that's one of the 7 books. It all just has to do with answering your question. So Greg came to me and he said, I was just hired by EMC, acquired by Dell several years ago.
The computer company, Yep,
okay, storage. And there are 14 regions, and I'm in charge of the region that is 12th. And it's not because I'm located in some place. It's not geographic. It's nothing, but I don't have the talent that my peers have, and even worse than that, than competitors have. This is really unusual because it looks as though if you want to succeed in this business, you, as you can say, damn well better have A players. And I don't have them. So he came to a 2-day workshop, and he used it, frankly, to top grade his team of almost 20 salespeople. And 1 year later, Greg had the #1 region at EMC. Number 1 in sales. Wow. And he had He had looked at people, he had assessed them the way he suggests. He tried coaching and training some, and frankly, he had to increase the compensation that he was willing to pay because that's what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
What our entrepreneurs who are watching this podcast realize with the pandemic is sometimes you just have to pay more because those
Yeah.
health warning signs are everywhere. So he was successful. The CEO of EMC rolled out top grading across the board. So that says a number of things. If A players in the top 10% of talent available, okay, you have to decide what level of talent you want, right? And you got to look at what your competitors are doing. You go to salary.com and you see what averages are and so forth. So pay the level. Then you have to recruit enough. Get as many applicants as you can. If you're not one of the Magnificent Seven, who they are, and you get thousands of applicants a day, then you have to do the things in order to get enough. Like 75 would be great. 75 applicants, and the top 10%, that would be one of the 7.5 people, if you can screen them well, and we have the instrument for doing that. So that'd be really good. And what we learned during the pandemic is what we've learned, frankly, for the past, I'll say what the number is, 50 years, okay? Anytime we start working with a company, and I'm sure I mentioned it when you saw me, recruit from your networks. That's something every entrepreneur probably does. I mean, who do you know who are A players and you're putting your initial team together? Okay, maybe some relatives or friends. You've heard the stories about the multi-zillion dollar companies where they started in the garage, and hired people they went to high school with them, and then they all dropped out. Well, okay, that can get a little extreme. But there's a woman in Chicago, Ann Drake, was a woman who was CEO of the third largest company run by a woman. She's retired now. She's doing something else with her passion. But she built a great company, and she said, here's what we do. We at DSC Logistics, we recruit all day, every day with everyone we meet. And let's do it. And she'd talk about it and reward people. She'd pay bonuses. GE under Jack Welch, man, he didn't keep it quiet. We don't want our competitors to discover top grading. Bull. He wanted thousands of vendors to serve GE with A players. And so he set the example, and he wanted everyone, and there were hundreds of thousands of people and thousands of managers at GE. Think about this, talk about it. Who do you know who might be an A player? Okay, and they tremendously eliminated contingency recruiters. They rarely used executive search firms because they would be recruiting from their networks. Yeah. Having said that, if you just can't get enough applicants, I encourage you to pay for job boards, okay, and they'll send you a lot of resumes. But if you use then the pre-screen snapshot, which is very simple to use, we'll find out in a hurry. You'll find out the 1/3 who are the most honest and the highest performing people. That will save you time. That will save you money, and you go from there. So the long story short is because we're interviewing people, maybe going through 10 or 12 jobs, when we get to, all right, you were a manager responsible for 20 people. How many were A players, B players, C players? That was good. Just to finish the point, we'd also ask at the end, you left 3 years later, how many A players, B players, and C players? The frustrating thing from the manager's standpoint throughout history is it's no better, because only 25% of the people they hire turn out to be A players. Let's see, I'm going to set the standard for hiring in my company. I'm an entrepreneur watching this podcast. I'm just going to hire A players. But if you don't have the methods of top grading, at least the ones in foolproof hiring, if you're not doing that and you're only 25% successful, then you hire the first person, darn it, fire them. All right, not an A player. All right, hire another person. Ah, darn it. Fire number 2 because that's not an A player. And the third person, oh no, fire that person. But the fourth person, 25%, is an A player. That would be chaotic, right?
Yeah.
So you have to experience the higher percentage of A players in order to set the bar higher for your company. You got to keep your B players, in other words, until you know you can replace them with A players, right?
Yeah. So what would be your reaction response if an entrepreneur, let's say $20 million revenue company to $50 million, small to mid-sized company, if they said top grading's too complex for me? Now, how would you react to that to help them to understand the value?
Yeah, it's not in the sense of you implement top grading, you'll get the results guaranteed. Why would we guarantee it if just kind of normal, common entrepreneurs wouldn't be very likely to be successful?
Yeah.
So, at the ridiculous extreme, I'm flying someplace and wheels are down, and the guy next to me or woman would say, "Ah, you're that top grading guy, right? Right. Tell me quickly, before we get off the plane, how can I hire better?"
Yeah.
And I respond to that on condition they will send me results. If you do it, you try it, tell me how it worked out. Another time on CNN, Poppy Harlow, who's one of the main people now at CNN, said, "Brad, before we started, can you summarize top grading keys in 1 minute?" I said, "Yes." And then she said, "Well, you have a PhD and then 25 years of experience, and you can summarize the keys to success in a minute?" Yes. And here it is. Okay. How do you stop being fooled? You heard this when you saw me. Let candidates know that a final step in hiring is for them, not you, for them to arrange reference calls with managers they've reported to and anyone else you want. That's the truth inspirer. People who go like this and say, "I don't think I can get my bosses to talk." You don't want, let them go. That's fine. How I hit on that short story is I interviewed someone in my first year as a professional, and I joked about, so you've given the client, 3 names of people they're going to contact, but they're your buddies, right?
Yeah.
All right. He said, "No, actually, they're managers I reported to." And I say, "Well, and they'll take the call? I mean, managers you've reported, they will take the call?" "Yes, of course." None of them would think for a moment that I would sue them, and that's the big concern, probably in Australia, but certainly in the United States. Oh no, companies shouldn't let their managers take the calls. This has worked for literally 50 years. There hasn't been one lawsuit where anyone has been heard in any way using this method. So if you're going to do that, let them know. Okay, after you use a pre-screen snapshot and you have maybe 10 people that you're going to phone screen interview, the pre-screen snapshot has in there 3 times, 3 different ways. Final step in hiring is for candidates range reference calls. So this is from home. You do your phone interview, then your other interviews, do anything you want to do, but then finally do those reference calls. So you have an offer on the table, all right, and say, as we talked about several times, okay, we'd like you to arrange the reference calls. Not schedule them, just arrange them. Let's talk to these people, Pat Jones and Joe Smith and so forth, and get back to me. And they'll do that within 48 hours. They'll say, "Yeah, those 5 people you want to talk with, here's their cell number. Please call them on the weekend," or something like that. And when they get back quickly on that, that means they're confident those bosses are going to say positive things overall. What's really cool, though, Brad, is and you know this, those bosses will also say, "Here are some weaker points, some areas for improvement, things that they should learn," and they know that I am telling you this.
Yeah.
This brings honesty into hiring, where rampant dishonesty today is going to cause a lot of problems for hiring managers everywhere. The thing that's difficult, and that what I've not mentioned, but I'll mention it now, is a top grading interview. That's a chronological interview. You go through all the jobs. Interviewing is difficult. We spend a couple days on this in workshops because there are like 24 things not to do and 24 things to do. But I have also a secret there, something we discovered at GE. After 4 years, they'd gone from 25% to 50%. A players hired. Yay! High five! This is the best of Fortune 500 companies. I wasn't satisfied. Jack wasn't, because he was never satisfied. He always wanted more.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing future CEOs at GE, whom I trained, okay, struggling. They were struggling. They weren't connecting the dots. We were going through for each job, what they did, how they liked it, high points, low points, relationships with peers and leadership style, what they thought of their boss. Very important, by the way, what they thought of their boss. And best guess what their boss will say about them and why they left. That's it. Top grading interview, and they were missing things. That's because there's so many things to do. So if I'm interviewing you, you said high point of that year was also a low point, but the high point was there were some people who, because of the pandemic, left. They were sick, and the president of the company asked me to take on a significant project for going international. And this was complex, caused a lot of long days, but I got the president award that year. Then you should think, Brad just said, and there were problems too. But you're thinking, okay, you're watching Brad's body language, you're anticipating the next question, you didn't want to bias Brad, you wanted to do all these things you're not supposed to do, and you just didn't do that. That's what I was seeing. And I got back to people and say, Brad said, and there were problems in going international. You ask that, and Brad would say, I took on so much that I was a little late with deadlines and over budget. Yeah, whatever the heck it was, but this thing. So what's the solution here? Here it is. This is a simple solution. Have a partner, a tandem interviewer. 2 heads immediately at GE were better than 1. Everybody loved it. There might be a principal interviewer and a secondary interviewer. The principal interviewer asks a lot of questions, takes a few notes. Secondary interviewer asks fewer questions, usually at the end of a job, and takes a lot of notes, or alternate jobs. It doesn't make any difference. If an entrepreneur doesn't have a marketing department, it's the first one, maybe find someone who knows something about marketing, one of their friends who would just sit in on the interview. They don't have to be trained anymore. Just 2 heads are so much better than 1. They fill in, it's like Swiss cheese, filling in holes of experience and so forth. So those are some things to do. So if people get into it as you did, you probably said, okay, it's got to learn some basics, and maybe some other managers do it, and you try, you learn. It's practice, takes practice. Doesn't necessarily take 5,000 interviews to be really good. And that's why we're still in the business for senior jobs interviewing people.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the cost of hiring is outrageous, as you detail in the books, and I think that start with the small steps is probably what I would say, because there are some awesome things that you can just do, like the thread of reference check, which I think has got a new name now.
Yes. Well, the thread of reference is torque technique. It's like we're squeezing people, but to A players, it's a promise. It's an opportunity. It's volunteered. So we call it the top grading truth motivator.
Yeah, it's a bit more politically correct, but I mean that in itself, where you say to a candidate, so when we speak to this person who was your last manager at your second, third, fourth last job, what are they going to recommend? Like that in itself is just one of the very small things that you can do as an entrepreneur if you feel it's too complex. And then when that thing works, then take on the next thing and take on the next thing.
Something else, 2 other things, which is I think a lot of scaling up consultants do it. They ask people to just look at your team. How many A players do you have, right?
Yeah.
People I would enthusiastically rehire. If it's not 70% anyway, then they probably are frustrated with any mishires, because those mishires are slowing them down. All right. Something else I can do, it's free. Go to topgrading.com and click on resources and then click on calculate cost of mishire.
Yeah.
It's simple. You've done it. It's just that all these different sources of cost. You do it, push the button, you say, wow, that's more than I thought it would be. Oh, we're not done. Then how many hours were wasted, preventing and fixing mistakes? That's usually in the hundreds of hours. So is it worth it to keep trying and learning and improving over time? That, to your point, is, let's experience some successes, some things that motivate you.
One of the things, I guess, from the trenches, for want of a better term, one of the things that we so often see, maybe it's to do with the pandemic, maybe it's Australia, but it's not enough candidates applying. And when you don't have enough candidates applying, people are reluctant to have a rigorous hiring process.
That's right.
Because it's going to eliminate more people and then they're going to be left with no one. So do you have any tips for listeners on how to get more candidates to apply for a role?
Yes. It's funny but not funny with companies that hire people sight unseen. You don't even have to apply. All we need is know that you're a warm body. They got to be that desperate. How pathetic is that? Yeah. That what for all these years come back is most valuable is hire from networks. You have 20, 30, well, this might be a $50 million company, so you have 20, 30 people. Particularly put your arm around those A players and say, think of your network. Who do you know? Even if they're not an expert in something, just sharp people. They're resourceful, they're ambitious, they work well with people. A player, so you define A player. And when they recommend someone, then thank them publicly, give them a little more bonus at the end of the year or something like that. Make that be number one. Number two, it's something when we look at people's hiring methods, we're sort of surprised that their career section of their website is boring. Have some pizzazz in it. Go after best companies to work for in Perth. The employee satisfaction rates, a lot of companies, do that sort of thing. And if you think it's pretty good, then apply. And then it turns out your employees have high satisfaction. Advertise that. A players want to work with A players. Okay. So if you're a top grading company and you're striving to have A players, even that's something on your website that can be a plus to A players, but scary to people who know they're not A players. They don't want to join with people who are going to look down on them, that sort of thing. And I mentioned before, job boards, they're costly, but they'll give you a lot more applications, resumes. Depending on your business, you might have job fairs. My longest term client started out as just a tiny company in South Texas, H-E-B grocery company. You've never heard of them, but they're the most respected grocery company in America, beat Albertsons for 4 years in a row. They have such a terrific reputation. They just get tons of applicants for their entry-level jobs. They don't advertise for higher level jobs because they're always developing and promoting people from within. That's another tip I would give your entrepreneurs is it's better to promote from within than to use top grading just on outside people. You still use top grading methods.
Yeah.
Interview them, interview their boss, their peers, their direct reports, and make sure they're going to fit into whatever that job is. Maybe they'll try out that job for a summer or something like that. Look for opportunities to promote from within. That'll save you money, right?
Yeah.
The most common method.
Yeah, thank you. Some good tips in there. One of the things that I've seen work well related to that is applicant tracking systems for small to mid-sized companies. Any comments on applicant tracking systems? And for the audience, an applicant tracking system, it takes a person from when they first hire the job, it records them in a database, and it records data about that person as they go along the hiring journey. But it's specialized around the hiring process.
Yes, yes.
So specifically around hiring a team of A players, any comments or thoughts about applicant tracking
It
systems?
needs something to keep it organized. When you get to 20, 30, 40 people, you risk stretching the recruiters thin, so they're just getting the job done without that much focus on A players. So it makes it smoother. We're actually integrated. Top grading software is integrated in 7 systems. Our software is the applicant tracking system for very small companies, though we have something called Hiring Thing, which is a small, mid-size applicant tracking system. And they're the big ones that are just way, way more complex than you'd want to mess with. But yeah, and frankly, one of the things that artificial intelligence is going to help is to make applicant tracking systems even more smooth, efficient. We spent 2 hours this morning with a product manager who's getting us into artificial intelligence. And so we talked about the applicant screening tool is a pre-screen snapshot. She sees applications there. You get a score. You'll get a score. What are the chances are this person will be an A player? That's cool. So yes, it's not an unnecessary expense. It's a necessary expense. But you might look at small applicant tracking system focus, mid-sized company, and skip the big ones. Even though we're integrated with those, we're also integrated with Hiring Thing, which is a small one.
Yeah, I've had some clients who've had to manage hiring, recommended it, and it's worked quite well. And I remember in particular there was one organisation, and we were in our leadership team offsite, and they told me the story about a new hire who had been an unsuccessful candidate twice in the past. And they were like, oh, I'm so glad that I got the job the third time, to the horror of their new manager, because they're like, who did you apply with here before? It was a different person that rejected them, and then they got through.
And also, why were you rejected twice?
That's the point, right? But this is going to come through with an applicant tracking system, some kind of method system to manage, because it goes to someone's inbox related to that hiring campaign, and that's it.
I'll give you one more example of how
please.
There is a very high correlation between the implementation, the activities of top grading, and results. And every time we go back after a couple of years, it's a CEO says, hey, let's take a look at what we're doing. That's happened with a big company that has a couple of acquisitions in Australia, by the way. And sure enough, it makes a very easy graph. The companies that measure the activities, did they use the applicant screening tool? Did they used the phone screening device? Then all I have to do is submit those, and someone will put them in a folder, if nothing else, but the applicant tracking system. Then they have their other interviews, and did they have at least one chronological interview? Hopefully in tandem. That's the best shot at a top grading interview below the executive level. If they blew it off, you'd see the interview guide. You can do the interview guide. You can print it out and do it, or you can do it online. What? That must have been a 20-minute interview. Oh, this guy was great. And then the reference calls. It would be colossally not intelligent to get the commitment from the candidate that they will arrange calls and then not do it. That's really, really important. You check out everything else in business to see if something's going to work before you buy it and so forth. So that's one thing applicant tracking systems can do and should do, and that is track the activities. And if the activities are done, don't they have to be done well? Almost no. If they're done conscientiously, that's all you need is that they were done.
Yeah, that's a good start.
That's why I said earlier, you don't have to be a genius. I was making a joke about Dr. Brad Smart, expert at interviewing, but he's never conducted an interview. You know, yes, those entrepreneurs can do it.
Awesome. Thank you. The project that I'm working on, to just change gears a little bit at the moment, the project that I'm working on is about building a better business rather than the relentless, undisciplined pursuit of more. So for you, what do you think a better business looks like in your perspective? What's a better business?
Yeah. Well, I think what we were just talking about, the two things, right?
Yeah.
Better business. There's a blog that just came out, and we're going to put it on our website. And by Ken Griffin, you don't know him unless you're in financial services. He's one of the richest Americans. He's worth about $60 million. And the interview is about 12, 15 years ago, when his company, Citadel, wasn't worth much. And now Citadel has a portion of every investment activities. And he recorded for an hour and 15 minutes. So I say in the blog, all right, we've just cut it down to like 3 minutes. But you'll hear him say again and again, if you're a CEO, and I did actually mention a little bit earlier on the podcast, here's a discipline: hire A players. Do whatever you have to do to hire A players. And if that means, pay for job boards to get more applicants or whatever, you've got to do it, because the way to have a successful company is to have A players, and that goes across the board. It's not just hedge funds, for God's sake. And we have we have a lot of testimonials where CEOs say the same thing. There's an entrepreneur who only had 40 people in the company, but he top graded. And at topgrading.com, case studies, you'll see Aaron Patzer said, if I hadn't top graded, if I had one less A player, all right, and I had 90%, well, that was 36. I had 36 A players out of 40. If it had been 35, boom, I would have been out of business. We were that fragile at one time. But we succeeded, and I sold the company for $110 million. All right. Right. So that's a discipline. And then have the discipline around the top grading. So the people are using the activities and they're submitting them. So you have a measurement at least twice a year, maybe quarterly. So in our hiring and promoting, are we using these methods? The ones we've already talked about that are easy, they're common sense. You can start doing them tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you. So what is a book that you would recommend for our audience?
Yeah, the best of all the case studies was GE, because I trained 100 future CEOs who trained thousands of managers. There's nothing like it. And then so I'm going to recommend Winning by Jack Welch, because he makes a lot of reference to top grading. But here's how, in the 1980s, he started in about 1980, and the market capitalization of the value of the company at the end of the 1980s was $30 billion. That's before top grading. They started rolling it out in 88, 89. It was really going by 1990. And throughout the 1990s, he retired in 2001. The 1990s, GE went from 30, I'm trying to do it with my hand here, it's way down there, up to $574 billion.
Yeah.
It's not that they're the Amazon of the day, the most valuable company. But wow, what an increase. And he attributes that increase, no question, to so many A players. And that's why, adding the second interviewer is so important. The session C's, where the disciplines of top grading are recorded, they're measured, and managers are responsible for doing it. If you're not doing it, but you keep hiring from your network of all A players and your results are really, really good, fine, you get a pass.
Yeah.
But those are very rare people. The disciplines really do help.
Awesome. Thank you.
Winning.
Winning by Jack Welch. Yep, I'll put that in the show notes for
Strategy
listeners.
is another one by Larry Bossidy.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Strategy, the book Strategy. He was chairman, CEO of Honeywell, and I visited his plant right here in Phoenix a number of times. But he said it's not talent, Excuse me. He said it's not strategy. Anybody can have strategy. Jim Collins said the same thing. It's not strategy. It's not product. It's not the economy. It's none of those things. It's all about talent. There's only one ultimate lever for success in every organization, including non-for-profits, by the way, because I'm doing a lot of work there. It's talent. It's people. Jim Collins said, "Good isn't good enough when it comes to people." If you want a good to great company, you're going to have to hire great people too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the first rule, right? Get the right people on the bus doing the right things the right way. That's Jim's analogy there. So what haven't we discussed that you wanted to cover off today?
Well, there's one thing for sure is you go to topgrading.com, you'll get more tips just looking at the website. You can download an e-guide, which has more of the stuff. I'm revising that right now to add some things, some kind of new things on technology and AI and that sort of thing. So it'll take a couple months. But contact me. Now I'll give you a secret. My private email, I have about 4 email addresses. besmart@topgrading.com. Said, you watched Brad Giles Topcrest. I have this company. Now, this guy is so compulsive, I rarely go to bed at night without responding to emails. I'm happy to do it. And if it results in conversation, you've got a company, I don't know, $10, $50 million, it's your company. You want to chat and tell me your story. Okay, how you got there, what's your passion? Also tell me about your hiring method and so forth. I'll give you some tips. I always have another tip. Here's one more tip. It's this simple. It's one sentence. If you're using recruiters, whether they're executive recruiters at the highest level, contingency recruiters, they're only paid, okay, use the truth motivator with them. Use the truth motivator with them. For the book you recommended, the 3rd edition of Top Grading, I asked 200 CEOs, what % of the time when you use an executive search firm, okay, so it's high level, are you satisfied that you got our money's worth? 20. That's it. You want to jack that up to 90+%. Just tell all the recruiters at any level, I'm not going to interview anyone unless they have been told and agreed to arranging calls with bosses at an appropriate time when they want to, when there's a job, at stake there. You'll get your money's worth a whole lot more.
Awesome.
Sure.
Thank you. So people can learn more about you and your business. Topgrading.com. Again, that's the first point. The most recent book, Foolproof Hiring. Again, we'll put that in the show notes. And again, your email, Brad, was be smart at TopGrading.
At topgrading.com.
Awesome. Well, Brad, what a pleasure it's been. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today.
Oh, just happy to kind of update our relation, Brad, and hope we stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a good rest of the day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review for the podcast, that'd be really helpful to other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we can grow our community. If you want to find out more about our guests, head over to evolutionpartners.com.au/podcast, where you can find show notes and other additional reading. Hope to see you back next week. Until then, keep thriving.